Ah. Hey everyone, it's Sunday. Hopefully you guys are great. Very challenging times. So I had questions sent to me on Facebook and the internet. Let's just address three. The first one is, why do I wear this thing? And in combination of, how do you train for high altitude, or at least to decrease chances of high altitude sickness? Second would be, is there a dietary practice that helps with fighting COVID? Third would be, what is the best vitamin for COVID, or in case you get infected? The first question is, I wear this because I live in Illinois, so the best altitude that we have in Illinois is about 700 feet. Actually, that's 800. This is Mount Hoy in Blackwell. And when you go from training at 700 to 14,000 in Colorado, it certainly is going to be a jolt to the system. The problem is, when you're a flatlander, how do you get the body accommodated so that you'll be able to tolerate high altitude? You can induce a somewhat hypoxemic environment. So if your body gets used to small bursts, bite-sized episodes of decreased oxygen, that's hypoxemia. The theory is, and I don't know that the guy that sells this, I'll have to look him back up. The theory is that you will have a reflex reaction. The body will go through a little bit of a response of essentially sending a message to the lungs, the heart, the kidneys to produce more oxygen. A lot of mixed martial artists or professional athletes will try to train at altitude, high altitude, in order to have better cardiovascular fitness, and then they'll drop down right before a fight, right before an event. I think in the 70s they used to do blood doping, where they train high, get a high amount of red blood cells produced from training high, drop back down. They'd take their blood out at high altitude, drop back down, and force that blood into themselves, which is considered blood doping. You're gonna pack your blood vascular system with excessive amounts of sludge. Red blood cells might be there, maybe more efficient oxygenation, but that's also increasing your chances for stroke. So not a healthy thing. However, what I did with that mask was, I'm trying to at least get my respiratory musculature ready and my brain ready for that hypoxemic type state. Overloading the muscle and overworking the respiratory system, I think, will get you somewhat ready for training up at high altitude. I can't fly to Colorado that often, and I can't afford that barometric chamber, and I have my reservations about that. But if you train with an excessive amount of load and work, my theory is that your body will become adapted to that type of lactic acid buildup, work, endurance, and you might be able to tolerate the high altitude, low oxygen levels up top, 14,000 feet. So the pressure of oxygen is about the same, but it's just harder to get because per cubic meter, there's less oxygen, so you have to work twice as hard to get that fuel source in. So that's how I hopefully will be ready for high altitude. I made it last time, but I had to take a break so often it was ridiculous. Lactic acid buildup, hypoxemia, fast heart rate. Fast heart rate equals high temperature. It's not good to sweat when you're going up a couple hours, and then the temperature's dropping. So a whole bunch of dynamics that are important to remember. This leads into COVID, because a lot of the people that get put on ventilators in New York, for example, are middle-aged folks, certainly the older folks, but we're going to exclude them. The theory is that they actually don't have a low oxygen level. They just get very tired of breathing so fast. So they're called happy hypoxemics, versus the typical picture of acute respiratory distress syndrome, where you have low oxygen. So when first confronted a couple months ago, people would get put on vents and they'd still die. I think using ventilatory support to take care of musculature that's failing is important. Oxygen isn't as important. So I think that if you happen to get exposed to COVID as well, you'll fare better. I mean, one of the biggest symptoms I see recurrently in a lot of patients that have successfully beat COVID is I can't take a deep breath, or I'm going up a flight of steps and just so short of breath. So that's dyspnea on exertion. And I think that if you train with that this mask, it'll kind of get you ready for at least the endurance of having to take a deep breath repetitively over a long course of time. And so that's my theory. Don't just get this mask and do restrictive breathing. Get clearance from your doctor first and then try it out. I'd probably start, I'm used to doing endurance up and down inclines, either here Mount Hoy or Swallow Cliff Stairs in Palos Hills, but you have to have some basic level of functioning to tolerate the training. So number one, get cleared by your doc. Number two, gradually build up. If I'm going to be, it's now June, well, it's going to be June 1st. If I'm going to be hitting 14,000 feet in August, end of August, I got a lot of time. That is why I train this way. In addition to this load, I'll be, as I get into July, probably adding a big full back, probably 40 pounds, just to challenge legs and make it to the summit. I'll also be doing some climbing too, so as soon as Vertical Endeavors opens up and I get my backyard gym going, I'll be embracing that as well. So endurance is important. Second question is there a diet that helps with COVID? Documentation is very limited, but I can tell you this, if you eat a standard American diet, which is usually highly processed, that already gives you a hint of inflammation. Reactive oxygen species, because of the glucose metabolism pathway, very high. In addition to the crap load of fructose you might find in a standard processed American diet. So I would, at the least, get off of processed proteins, carbs, and fats. I don't know that there's a preference that one will get you more bulletproof or have you do better with COVID outcomes. I think it's just a matter of overall nutrition practice. So take care of all your deficiencies. Also, dialing in your nutrition practice. If you don't know what that means, then you probably should get a doctor that's well versed in it, or registered dietitian, or a nutrition coach. Now, there are people who aren't in any of those fields, and they do great, and I think it's important. You can read books, but you'll have to start that path or that journey soon, because we are probably, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we don't have a little surge of COVID. When you eat processed foods, you increase naturally your inflammatory response, because the processed foods, in some ways, if you want to break it down to it, are poison. Processed, no. Fructose, no. Creamers, no. Sugar, no. If you can get somebody to cook for you, awesome. If you can have minimally processed pre-cooked food, perhaps, that'd be good. But you always have to read labels. So it's important to find your groove. Is there a diet? No. There are definitely diets that are bad. There are some people who believe in keto, some people who are vegan, some people who are paleo, low carb, well formulated. It doesn't matter. There are parts of the world that embrace different macronutrient dominant practices, and they all are great. Gatavans ate a boatload of carbohydrates. Inuit, fat. Okinawans, fat, veggie, seafood combo. So Seventh-day Adventists, vegetarian. So there's different ideas. Sometimes you can test metabolics, insulin levels, 1 hour, 2 hour fasting glucoses, cholesterols. You can do all that stuff if you have insurance, but then the important thing is you have to get somebody to interpret that stuff and then translate it into a plan of action. So it'll take a team to put that together, but if you can, bottom line, if you can't get that team for you, look for them. If you can't find them in your area, read books. If you're not good at reading big texts, then you'll have to pay for an internet consult. So one way or another, don't continue down the same pathway. I don't care how old you are. That's what the beauty of those blue zones is. they compressed their morbidity, so they lived a long life and they died quick. Versus the United States, so you live short, but you die long. So I think it pays off. You just have to also invest exercise, activity, good sleep, love, happiness, and all that stuff. It will give you hopefully longevity without suffering. So
the last question that it was posed to me was, are there supplements that do help with COVID in case you get exposed? Yes, there's a plethora. I'll try to put some links down below, but I have a lot of them. So the most important things as a physician would be to give you suggestions on what has been proven. And what has been proven usually has to go through randomized controlled double-blind trials and given a thumbs up in a peer-reviewed journal. That's the way it works. But we don't have that option because this disease is just coming around. So we're gathering data as it evolves. But for the most part, I think there's a couple things that, considering the average American's deficiency, actually the average world deficiency, I'd take care of deficiency, as I mentioned, on top of Mount Hoy. Vitamin D is important to manifest or get to a good level. Good therapeutic level would be 50 to 70. I'd probably go more towards a 70 nanograms per deciliter on the blood test. So you'll have to get a blood test if you're just winging it. 5,000 to 10,000 a day, I think, should be fair, depending on your medical problems. Everybody has a different brand. Everybody's gut works differently. So I'll have to leave that up to you. And because of the prior data on coronavirus, not the COVID-19, but prior, zinc, I think, is really important. And zinc is not necessarily a deficient mineral, but it can be argued that higher doses help decrease that RNA polymerase reaction in most cells. The only problem with zinc is that, number one, you're going to push out copper. When you take zinc in, copper is going to leave in your poop, and you're supposed to absorb both copper and zinc if you're on a good whole food, mostly plant-based diet. And yeah, you can go keto, but if you are trying to, again, just talk about deficiency zinc, but the only problem with the zinc is that usually you have to get it into the cell. So check out the video I've done in the past. I like EGCG with low caffeine and quercetin. So the EGCG has done better, but it just so happens that if you take both, not a big deal. And if it's allergy season, which it is for a lot of you now, I'd say both of these things will help the zinc get into the cell and hopefully, in theory, help with the modulating RNA polymerase. So that usually is good enough. I have a whole bunch of other things, mushroom, omega-3, skullcap, anti-inflammatories in the gut like Saccharomyces. If you have a high body mass index, you got to get that down because that is a risk factor. High BMI greater than 25 is high. A lot of Americans, unfortunately, are 30. And that precludes you to disease, not only COVID, but heart attack. And that's, at this point in time, is really a bigger killer than COVID. So you got to look out for that. Again, if you allow that crap to come in and you increase your risk factors, you won't necessarily die because our healthcare system is awesome, but you will have a prolonged death. Nobody wants to live that. Talk to anybody that's survived COVID, and you'll see there's a little bit of a issue after the COVID. They're good, thank God, but they have a little bit of weakness, a little bit of shortness of breath, a little bit of fatigue. So hopefully this whole thing will give you a little bit of an idea about why I go to a mountain. Why does anybody climb a mountain? Why does anybody go rock climbing? Well, it's not just because it's there. You climb the mountain because it's there. It's because it engages someone to exercise. I'm 57, going on 58. If I didn't have a goal, then it would be really tough to get out and exercise, especially during COVID time. So this is definitely a challenging time, but all the things I do maybe would help me if I do get exposed to COVID, but definitely would help me in the long run because of my family history of heart disease and cancer. So hopefully this gives you a couple ideas. If you have any comments about what you would do as exercise and how you're trying to lose weight during post-COVID, please put them down below. Otherwise, if you have somebody else that's kind of on the fence trying to find their way and recover, send this to them and share it. See you in the next video.